Hey everybody, welcome today. I'm so excited that you are joining me for this session today. We are going to discuss creating a culture of regulation, understanding emotional regulation in the classroom setting. This is such an important concept right now. And so we're going to dig into what does emotional regulation mean? How do you do that in your classroom? How do you really develop a culture of regulation? So let's just go ahead and get started. A little bit about who I am. My name is Stacy, York Nation. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I have been doing social working with students, families, children for about the last 20 years. I got my start in school-based services. And in 2010, I discovered Dr. Bruce Perry with the Child Trauma Academy and actually discovered him in 2006. And then in 2010, I went ahead and started his certification process through the neurosequential model of therapeutics. And it's blown up into this really big organization where there's now neurosequential model in education and therapy and sports and community. And it really has taken a tool and like taken away, it's a framework, it's a way to view the world, and it's been really useful in my work with children and family and educators. And so if you're listening today, my guess is that you're curious about emotional regulation, you're curious about what this means in your classroom, and I'm here to talk about that with you. So most of the people that listen to this particular training are usually teachers or educators who are working in a classroom setting. You're thinking about, how do I manage all these kids with different needs and different developmental phases of their life? We've clearly been through a very difficult time through the pandemic, and we're moving into sort of just normalizing that as part of our life. But it's been a long couple years. And so for the last 2 years, I have been doing support groups for teachers and counselors and a separate support group for administrators. So today's lecture or information workshop is really based in my clinical experience, my experience working as a consultant with educators, and then a lot of the information that I've gotten from the support groups over the last 2 years. It just was time for me to put this information out, and this is a great opportunity to do that. So what I want you to do today is just be present, show up however you need to show up, take a break when you need to, pause when you need to. You'll have access to this for a long time. You can watch it again. I encourage you to listen to it, take notes as you need to, and then give yourself an opportunity to practice some of the things that we're talking about, and then come back to it a little bit later and listen to it again, if that makes sense. You'll get a lot out of this first go, and then you'll go out in the world and you'll say, oh, I tried this, Stacy, this worked, Stacy, this didn't work. This is, what I want you to know. So a couple of the things that are really just important to know about me. Part-time in the Army National Guard, and a lot of the information I share with you today, I also share with my soldiers. So the reason this stuff is important to me is because it's about the human experience, no matter what age you are or where you're at in your development. I'm also a divorced mom of 2, and my kids are currently teenagers. And so we talk and live this information on a daily basis. So in my world, things are pretty simple. You're either emotionally regulated or you're not. And there's not a lot of in between. You're either doing okay and you're stable, or you're really struggling and you need some support. There might be some graduate steps in there, or some, graduation of that, but we're going to dig into what that all means. So today we're going to talk about what is regulation and why is it important? What is co-regulation? What is a culture of regulation? And how do we foster that culture of regulation in the classroom? So sounds like 4 basic objectives, but it'll take us the full 50 minutes to get through it. So I am excited for you to learn this information. If you have questions that come up during this, I'm going to give you my email at the end. So feel free to write them down and then send me emails as you want to. Right. So first of all, our goal when working with students is to create an environment where they can learn, and through that they have to feel emotionally regulated. So what in the world does that mean? So emotional regulation, I often explain that our stress response system is like a rubber band. When we're stressed, we're stretched. And when we are feeling more relaxed, our rubber band is not as stretched. So emotional regulation means we have control of our emotions. We're managing our emotions. Our emotions are not hijacking our ability to think. Our emotions are not hijacking our ability to learn and to problem solve. And so what happens in emotional regulation is that our rubber band is less stretched. Our stress response system is feeling more calm, more emotionally regulated. Regulation really means managed, controlled, the ability to just take care of ourselves. So I have some biases as a mom, that my job as a mom is to send my kids off into the wonderful world as adults who can contribute to society through work or what they add as value to society. And they have the ability to be emotionally regulated. Now, not every person is emotionally regulated all the time. And no matter where you are in the pandemic or in your life or whatever, you're going to have times when you're more dysregulated. So dysregulation is a sign of stress. Dysregulation is that piece of like, oh, okay, I'm feeling more stretched and a little bit more stressed. So we want to really think about, am I dysregulated? Am I emotionally regulated? How do we do it? That's what we're going to spend time talking about today. And how do we teach it? So let's dig into some of those concepts. So first of all, what does dysregulation look like? Dysregulation in a classroom setting can look like our heart rate changing. So did you know that our physiology can tell us if we're emotionally regulated or not? Think of a time when you've been in a stressful situation and your heart rate has amped up a little bit, like, whew, I had to be on top of this. You have a little shot of adrenaline, your cortisol levels spike a little bit. You're like, yep, I got to be a little bit more aware of this. Or think of a time when you might have felt scared or threatened and your heart rate starts to go, ooh, I got to stay alive. I need to shut down. So in a classroom setting, the same thing happens with children. Their heart rate will shift and change. They could have a heart rate that's a resting heart rate of around 70 or 80. When they're feeling dysregulated, it can spike up to 120. Some of the kids in your classroom are going to have heart rates that are resting heart rates around 100 or 120. You want to collect that data through an oximeter, or maybe they have a smartwatch, Fitbit, whatever. And then when they get stressed, it spikes even higher. I have a young lady that I work with. She was in her teens when I started working with her. When she gets stressed, when her rubber band is stretched, her heart rate starts to close down. When she starts to have an emotion on board, when she's feeling activated, her heart rate drops to about 30 or 35. So we want to look at heart rate changes. Dysregulation can also look like what we call dissociation versus arousal. So dissociation, we all live on this continuum. Dissociation's on one side, arousal's on the other side. Dissociation is about like sort of being checked out, right? You have kids in your classroom who maybe one day they know their math facts and the next day you're like, did you even listen to that lesson? Like, what happened to all that information? Dissociation is like, hello, is anybody in there? They're frozen. They look a little bit checked out. How many of you have driven to work and you don't remember the drive? That's dissociation. How many of you have brushed your teeth? You know you've brushed them every day, but you don't remember brushing them every day. That's dissociation. The other side of that is arousal. Arousal is this feeling of, a little bit more agitated, a little bit more amped up. It might look like aggression. It also might look like running away. You're feeling a little more aroused. How many of you had a stronger reaction to a situation than maybe what the situation warranted? That's arousal. We all live on the continuum of dissociation and arousal. For many of us during the pandemic, at the very height of 2020, March, April, May, we're on either side. We're maybe not feeling as stable, or if you've gone through grief or loss, maybe not as stable, right? You're not as in the middle, you're swinging on the pendulum. That can look the same in a classroom setting. For those of you who work with younger kids, I know you're hearing this a lot. I have a headache. I need to go home. My stomach hurts. Can I see the nurse? For those of you who work with teenagers, you're hearing like, I don't feel good. I'm out of here. Or sometimes kids will just leave and not come back. Those are somatic complaints. Our body really does keep the score. So our body is playing out some of our dysregulation when we feel sick to our stomach, or when we feel sort of like not right physically. We have some somatic complaints that are directly connected to our mental health. Okay. It looks like lack of self-regulation. We have students in our classroom who just cannot self-regulate. They cannot keep their emotional regulation together. They're agitated or stretched so much that it spills all over everyone else. Some of you are like, I'm spending 90% of my time with 10% of my students because their behaviors are all over the place. That is self-regulation, the inability to self-regulate. Kids lack empathy. Empathy is a very interesting discussion that I have with a lot of adults. So many educators will say to me, this kid has no idea how his behavior is impacting others. This kid has no idea what's happening in his life and how his behavior impacts the students, or how her behavior impacts people at recess or in the hallways. That's lack of empathy. So here's the thing about empathy. First of all, empathy is developmental. If I go into a restaurant with my infant child and my infant starts to cry and is disrupting the entire restaurant, does my infant lack empathy? Yes. Is my infant a psychopath? No, it just means that this infant has needs that need to be met and cannot actually care about other people. Empathy can only be given when we are out of survival mode. So if you have a kid in your classroom who doesn't have empathy, it's because they're in survival mode. They are dysregulated. That kid cannot care about others because that kid is keeping him or herself alive. Okay. Dysregulation also looks like an increase in peer problems. You have kids who are wandering your halls in your classrooms who cannot actually get along well with others. They're having a hard time reading social cues. They're having a hard time understanding social dynamics. It might look like fighting. It might look like tattletaling. It might look like just a lot of drama and a lot of like he said, she said. Huge increase in peer problems. Dysregulation also looks like an escalation in difficult behaviors. So what that means is that a student may become more defiant. A student may become more aggressive. They might become physically assaultive. They might also run away or flee. They might have an increase in absences, which we're going to talk about. You might see truancy or skipping school. You might see an increase in alcohol or drug use, an increase in promiscuity. Depending on what age of kids you work with, escalation in difficult behaviors is an indication of dysregulation. Okay. You're also going to see a decrease in homework completion. I have a young man right now who just is refusing to do homework at home. And I said to the parents, it's not worth the fight. This kid is managing his business all day at school. He's not even regulated consistently throughout the school day. To bring school home and try to get him to do things at home is just going to stretch that rubber band and increase dysregulation. When kids need after school, what they really need is they need to decompress. They need to play, they need to engage in creative play, they need to be outside, they need to be connecting with their family. So sometimes you're going to see a decrease in homework completion because the dysregulation is so big, right? The rubber band is stretched. You might also see a lack of focus and concentration. Really difficult for kids to focus and concentrate when they're feeling dysregulated. And then you might see an increase in absences, and truancy, more skipped things. So just keep those things in mind as you're thinking about dysregulation. Behavior is a huge indicator and a way of students. Behavior is the language of students. So behavior is really a communication of, am I regulated or am I dysregulated? Okay, so we just sort of want to look like that. We also want to just acknowledge that there are kids who have different neurodiversity, right? Your neurodiverse kids might have a different dysregulation, might look different for a kid on the spectrum, or a kiddo who has different neurodiversity. Neurotypical kids, this is what you're going to see. Might I also add, this is what we do as adults when we're dysregulated. Our heart rate changes. We have an increase in emotional responses. Our stomach hurts, our knee hurts, our back hurts. We have the same sort of behaviors when we're dysregulated. So this whole concept of emotional regulation is about the human experience. And that's one of the reasons I think this is such an important conversation. So in order for us to understand emotional regulation and how to do it, we have to understand brain development. So this is Dr. Perry's slide. Dr. Perry's written a couple books, two that I just want to mention. One is The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. Really important if you're working in a setting where kids have been through a lot of trauma, a lot of stress, toxic stress, important book to read. The second book, which is the most recent book he's released, he wrote with an author named Oprah. We've all heard of her, right? And it's called What Happened to You. You'll see this picture in that book. And it talks about brain development and the importance of us understanding the way the brain works. And in this discussion we're having today, it's important to understand that because it will help us emotionally regulate more efficiently, right? So my job is to help you do your job, which is to teach. And teaching is about academics. We can't get to academics if kids are not emotionally regulated. So let's talk about this slide for a minute. So this slide is really the brain. It's a different version of what a brain looks like, but it helps us break down the brain. So the brain develops from the bottom up, from the inside out, okay? The very bottom part of that brain to develop is the brainstem. Housed in the brain stem is the somatosensory system and your fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. So those live in the same part of the brain, and that part of the brain develops in utero to 9 months old, okay? So by 9 months old, this part of the brain is fully developed. I call the brainstem the foundation of the house. If you build a house on sand, the house is not going to be as strong later on. If you build the house on concrete, give it a solid foundation, you're going to have a stronger brain later on. We're going to come back to that, okay? So bottom of the brain, first part to develop, brainstem, develops in utero to 9 months old, okay? Next part of the brain to develop is that midbrain or the diencephalon. That develops from 4 to 6 years old, and it's responsible for your emotional regulation. You know, whether you can say, I feel mad, glad, sad, scared, how you can respond to sitting and listening and focusing. It's responsible for what we're discussing today. This is a key component to what we're discussing. The next part of the brain to develop is that limbic system. The limbic system is really responsible for our relationships and our social skills, our ability to understand and read situations. And the last part of the brain to develop is the cortex. The cortex is fully developed by 25 years old. And depending on what happened during development, sometimes, you know, we can be delayed in our development depending on what we're going through. So the cortex is responsible for problem solving, critical thinking, decision making, reflection, introspection, understanding what's happening. I call it your worst enemy because you have one and they don't. Students don't have a fully developed cortex. We do a lot of asking why. When we ask a question why, what do kids say? When you say, why did you do that? Kids say, I don't know. You say, but we talk about it every day. You do this thousands of times. They say, I don't know. We have to stop asking why. That is going to be a key piece to emotional regulation. Think of a time in your life when someone you love, a spouse, a coworker, your kid, someone you're emotionally connected to, when they ask you a question, why did you do that? Is that a warm, fuzzy question? Does that create connection? No, you're triggered. It rubs us the wrong way. When we ask why, and it's connected to emotional content, that is not helpful. So we ask why when it comes to history and social studies and science, things that are factual outside of our relational and emotional experience. The question why is not helpful for emotional regulation. So if the brain develops from the bottom up and from the inside out, and our students are not sitting in our classroom with fully developed brains, there are two ways to develop or to emotionally regulate. We can regulate from the bottom of the brain up or from the top of the brain down. What's the right answer when it comes to students? Bottom up. The right answer is bottom up. Okay. We have to engage in regulating students from the bottom of their brain up. So when you look at this slide, what that means is we have to engage the bottom of the brain to regulate in order to get to the top of the brain where academics are. All right. So we have to engage the sensory system. We have to understand sensory system. We have to understand emotional regulation. We have to understand social skills. We have to use our cortex as adults to say, oh, that kid is emotionally struggling. That kid is emotionally dysregulated. How can we support them and help them? Let's engage from the bottom up. Okay. So I want you to think about that for a minute. How are you engaging with your students in a bottom up way when they're feeling dysregulated? Okay, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to spend the rest of this time today talking about that. Before we do that, we have to understand the difference between co-regulation and self-regulation. Okay, how many of you have called a friend when you're having a bad day? How many of you talked to a therapist to work through a problem? How many of you have talked to a friend or a spouse or coworker when you're struggling with a situation at school? Co-regulation is you showing up and sharing your regulation with someone who's dysregulated. So I'm going to say something that's very important. We cannot self-regulate until we've been co-regulated. Co-regulation is actually developmental stage. We have to have had an adult, another human, share in our emotions, like help us alongside us when we're very dysregulated, when we're stretched, when our rubber band is so stretched. As a student or a kid, we have to have an adult that helps us unstretch that. And we have to go through that process multiple times, hundreds of repetitions before we can do that on our own. That is a key piece of what's happening in schools. We just expect kids to know how to behave, to know how to regulate, when maybe we need to be offering co-regulation. So the other thing I would say, and I think many of my colleagues who are in this field would agree with, is that the human experience is actually just really about co-regulation. So I showed up at a training earlier this month. I'm in a school, we show up, it's myself and one of the people that's bringing me in for the training, and the fire alarms are going off. This is a very emotionally intelligent human, teaches a lot of the same stuff I teach. She brought me in, the fire alarms are going off. She is losing her business. She is becoming dysregulated. And she's like, we are not going to be here all day long with these fire alarms going off all day. And I just looked at her and was like, girl, we'll be fine. We have an hour to figure this out before everyone gets here. So I was offering her co-regulation, and she even looked at me. She's like, I need your co-regulation right now. That's really helpful. Thank you. That is the human experience. I could have gotten on board with her and been like, you're right. We can't have these going off all day. That's going to ruin our day. That's not going to solve the problem. Or I can look at her and be like, okay, she's having a moment, which is an appropriate moment. She's got a speaker coming in. She's got teachers coming in. We can't have fire alarms going off all day. She wasn't wrong. But I could be like, wait a minute, time out. We got time to solve this. Who do we need to call? How do we get through this? Co-regulation is really the human experience. And part of what's happened in education is our kids are just showing up more dysregulated. They're showing up more dysregulated because academics are pushing harder sooner. Kids want to play more. They're showing up dysregulated because we're living in a time of screens. Kids are being exposed to screens more often. They're having less human interaction. Dysregulation happens for a long time, for a lot of reasons, for a lot of different reasons. So we really have to think, I'm a co-regulator. So I often say to teachers, your main job as a teacher, the strategy that's going to help you get to academics quickest is to offer co-regulation. So how many of you have been in a car accident? When you were in that car accident, did the paramedics come? And when the paramedics came, did they say, what the hell were you thinking? You're ruining my life today. I can't believe that you would do this. Of course not. They didn't do that because paramedics have been trained to be professional co-regulators. They are showing up at the scene of an incident on someone's worst day. If they yelled at us, we would kill them, right? It would engage our fight, flight, freeze in a huge way, and we would have a stronger response. No, what they do is they show up and they say, who can I call? Do you need a blanket? Do you need water? They start responding in a way that's very co-regulating. So we want to remember that that's our job. Kids are going to be dysregulated. The pickle of teaching is that it's pretty difficult to get everybody regulated at one time. So what do? We want to start looking at bottom-up regulation. So bottom-up regulation means you're engaging in the brainstem, which houses your sensory system and your fight, flight, freeze response. And you're engaging, right, in a way that is really, are their basic needs met? So remember how I said that your heart rate can change if you're dysregulated? So you have a kid in your classroom and they're feeling pretty stretched all the time. Their heart rate's going to be higher. They're going to burn more calories. They're going to be hungrier. So you want to look at, does this kid need more food? Do I need to be flexible in some times, in some areas on my eating policies in my classroom because kids need to eat? Okay. Have these kids slept? Some students are showing up to school because they need to sleep. Let's talk about sleep for a minute. Kids only sleep when they feel safe. Okay. Safety is a huge piece of needing sleep. So if you are staying up at night because you don't feel safe at home, where are you going to come to feel safe and sleep? School. Some of you are going to say, well, they're staying up all night playing video games. They may be staying up all night playing video games, and they may be doing that because they are not safe. Bad things happen at night. Ask any first responder. They have an increase in calls at night, increase in alcohol, increase in drug use, increase in domestic violence, increase in sexual abuse, physical abuse, all happens at night. So if you're a kid and you're exposed to any of that, suddenly night feels very scary. You're not going to fall asleep. Okay, so basic needs. Have they eaten? Have they slept? Do they need water? Do they need to drink water? I grew up in the 80s, and in the 80s, you got a quick little water break in the morning at the water fountain and a quick little water break in the afternoon. Now we have water bottles, right? I rarely go anywhere without my water bottle, and my kids are taking their water bottle to school. They've been doing that their whole life. So we want to make sure kids are drinking enough water. We have to look at movement. So I had the opportunity this summer to be with a group of teachers, or about 50 teachers, all from the same school district, kindergarten through high school. And we went through this question of how long can a kid stay seated, focused, and regulated to a point of learning. We started in kindergarten. In kindergarten, at the beginning of the school year, the teachers are saying like they can stay pretty regulated and focused all in one spot without their bodies going everywhere for about 5 to 7 minutes. Okay, 5 to 7 minutes, then they need a movement break. By the end of the school year, they're probably at about 10 to 15 minutes. So they've doubled, and that's still not very long before they need a break. We got all the way up to high school, and the high school teachers are saying, yeah, at about 30, 35 minutes, we got kids that need to be moving, okay? Those are kids that are developmentally on task. Those are kids who are developmentally where they need to be. Kids who are dysregulated are going to need more movement. I teach adults. Adults can only stay focused for about 40 minutes. At about the 35, 40 mark, you're going to be like pausing, taking a break, come back and finish this 50-minute video. So you want to look at, am I offering flexible seating? Not all kids need flexible seating, but some kids need flexible seating. My son had an amazing 3rd, 4th grade teacher. And in that classroom, first of all the kids had rocking chairs. It's just the whole school had rocking chairs at their desks instead of regular seating. So all kids had an opportunity for flexible seating and movement. In this particular classroom, they had access to 2 T stools. The T stools, right, are the ones that you can rock back and forth. They look like a little T. And each week, the T stool was assigned to a new kid. And he did 2 things that were really cool. One, he said, if you don't need the T stool and you think someone else needs it, you can gift it to them. That is an example of creating a culture of regulation. We're going to dig a little bit more into culture, so hang in there. But he was like, look around. If you have somebody in this classroom that you think needs this more than you do, gift it to them. The second thing he did was it was okay to gift it to the same kid. By the end of the school year, the same kid had the T stool for the rest of the year, from like March until the end of the year. And I said to my son, but that's not fair, because that's not fair is a cortex question. I'm an adult, right? And he said, Mom, why in the world does it need to be fair? This kid clearly needs it more than anyone else in the classroom. And if he needs it to learn, when he's regulated, everyone else is regulated. And we can all learn. When he's dysregulated, we're all dysregulated, and it impacts our learning. Why wouldn't we set him up for success? Kids who are on task, on development, kids who can regulate, self-regulate and on development, they're going to do these things naturally. So offering flexible seating, offering movement breaks, those are really important to the culture of regulation. We're going to talk about how you set up the culture. You talk about the rules in a minute, okay? Also want you to start looking at pattern repetitive activity or movement. Everybody does this. You're probably doing it right now. You might be chewing gum, you might be doodling, you might be knitting, you might be rocking or spinning in a chair, you might be tapping a pen, you might be shaking a leg, you might be moving your foot. All of us engage in some sort of pattern repetitive movement. When you have extremely dysregulated kids, start observing through the lens of pattern repetitive movement, and you're going to see what they need. You might have a kid who's tapping, you might have a kid who's clicking, you might have a kid who's poking. They're going to teach you about their response system, okay? And we also want to remember kids who seek attention need connection. So attention is like, hey, I see you. Connection is like, what do you need from me? How can I support you? Okay, connection is a deeper piece. And those kids who are constantly seeking that need connection, not just attention. They need that co-regulation piece. So co-regulation is when we complete the stress cycle with the support of a safe enough person. Infants and small children do not have the biological capacity to complete the stress cycle, okay? That is built over time through a multitude of co-regulation experiences. So I'm a therapist. So people come into my office dysregulated. No one comes to therapy when they're regulated, by the way. They always come into therapy when they're dysregulated. My job is a professional co-regulator. My job is to show up as a calm, loving, safe person who just holds someone else's dysregulation, offers my co-regulation. My job is not to become a part of it. Okay. A safe enough person is a person in a safe and social mode. They have deep belly breathing, expressive face, soft gaze, calm heart rate. Look, we're looking at heart rate, prosodic voice, and the ability to enjoy safe touch and closeness. So I just want you to think about that co-regulation component. Okay. So this is what looks like to have co-regulation in a classroom setting. The child or the student has increased, right? You're seeing this increase from an alarm to terror, and the teacher joins into that. When a teacher matches a student's dysregulation, first of all, the whole interaction is going to take longer. And second of all, it just increases. What happens is you are becoming a part of the crisis. Okay. This is when a reactive child is overwhelmed, teacher's overwhelmed, everyone's reacting. It just sort of ends up being a disaster. Everyone is stretched. When we look at sharing co-regulation, this is what it looks like. The kid is having a response. The kid is having this huge emotional response. And what we're doing is saying, I see you're having an emotional response. How can I support you? Support comes in present, parallel, patient, persistent. Okay, so present, you have to be attuned. You have to know what's going on. You have to tune into that. Parallel, side by side. Okay, not face to face, side by side. When we are face to face and we give eye contact, when people are dysregulated, frightening. We learn if eye contact is safe in utero and through our first beginning, like infancy years. Okay. Most of the time, what I say is eye contact is earned, not demanded. We very rarely say, I want to see your eyes when we're happy and we're connecting. We say, I want to see your eyes when we're upset and we want to prompt and correct. So if we can focus on parallel or side by side, offering co-regulation, that's going to de-escalate the situation sooner. We also focus on a multi-sensory experience. Remember, bottom up, okay? We engage in the sensory pieces. So you might offer a kid a minty, sour, spicy. Those three tastes will activate the taste part of a sensory system, and a kid's sensory system has to decide, like the brain has to decide, am I going to process the sensory taste, or am I going to process this really big feeling? So a lot of time a taste can really de-escalate a situation pretty quickly. I have a lot of administrators I work with that just have a bowl of mints or Altoids, and they offer one to a kid before the kid comes into the room, okay? Or before they start to process what's happening. And then we want to look at repetitive activity. So I shared earlier that I did school-based mental health for a long time. And in school-based mental health, what happens is a student is dysregulated. The teacher usually calls and says, hey, this kid's having a hard day. Can you come get the kid? I say, okay. So before I knew any of what I knew now, what I would do is I would go get the kid. I would take the kid out of the classroom and I would take the kid for a walk. So I'm engaging in pattern repetitive activity. I usually gave them a snack or we had some sort of drink of water. Gave them positive attention because I'm giving them positive connection. I am attempting to regulate them one-on-one. Go for a walk, get them a snack or a drink of water. We would go out and we would shoot hoops, or we would go to the swings. We would engage in more pattern repetitive activity. We would walk back, we would return them to class. Kid is regulated. Okay. Here's what I've learned. I thought about that for a long time. And then I thought, oh my gosh, you know what I'm doing wrong? The teacher, I should have taken the teacher on a walk. I should have given the teacher a snack or a drink. I should have let the teacher shoot hoops or go for a swing ride, right? Walk the teacher back. So then the teacher's regulated. Then I thought about that a little bit longer. And what I've landed on is I should just take over the class. The teacher and the student should engage in that. The teacher and the student should engage in the regulation, the snack, the pattern repetitive activity, the connection, and then return to class. So you want to be looking at how are you staying regulated as your kids are dysregulated. So what does that mean when you're creating a culture of regulation? Okay, when you're creating a culture of regulation, you want to start thinking about your classroom structure. How many of you do classroom rules? All of you probably do, right? All of you are doing classroom rules, and your classroom rules are going to be things like treat others the way you want to be treated, clean up. We're all here to help each other out. Teamwork is the dream work, right? I need to know where you are. Please ask before you leave. What if you add to your classroom rules, we're here to support each other through emotional regulation. Start to normalize the conversation. Some of you are going to show up in a bad mood. I'm going to have a day where I show up and I'm tired. We have to take care of our physiology. We might have a cozy corner in our room. We might have a regulation center in our school. We might have a rocking chair in a pod. Depending on what grade you're in, all of those could be real in the schools that you're in. You have to teach kids how to use that. If you come to school and you're having a bad day and you're in a bad mood and you go to the cozy corner and you're there all day long, you may need it for only an hour, and you're robbing other kids of the opportunity to use that when they need it. So you want to talk about physiology. What do you need to be regulated? Okay. Hangry is a real thing, and many kids have no idea that they're hungry or they're thirsty. They're so disconnected from their bodies that they may not know what they need. So part of your classroom rules and your classroom culture is created at the very beginning of the school year around, listen, we're a family. Families have bad days. In order to get through a bad day, we got to talk about emotional regulation. We got to support each other, and we got to help each other out. You may have an oximeter. An oximeter is the thing that goes on your finger, gives you two numbers. It gives you your oxygen level and gives your heart rate, your beats per minute. You may teach kids how to use that at the beginning of the school year. I have several schools that I work with. They're just hanging on the doors. Kids can check their heart rate when they come in, or if they're having a bad day, they can just go up. If they're feeling stretched, they can go up, they can look at it, they can engage in some breathing, and they can see if their heart rate's starting to calm. They can get a drink of water, they could go for a walk, they can come back. You're going to teach culture of regulation. You're going to talk about regulation. That is such an important thing. We're not even talking about it. I knew the first day of high school, my daughter was going to come home emotionally dysregulated. It's first day of school, first of all, right? They've been out of school for 3 months. Second of all, it's high school. It's a whole new world. It's a really long day. What happens? She comes home exhausted, tired, tearful, all the things. It takes about 2 hours. Got to get some food in her, got to get her some rest, got to engage in some movement. We have to start talking about the normalizing of emotional regulation. Then we start talking about relationship. That's an important piece. How do we build relationship? If we start talking to kids about emotional regulation, what they're going to start talking about is, hey, you look dysregulated. How can I support you? What can I do for you? Or you're going to see kids who dysregulate each other, and you're going to see kids who are great co-regulators. Hey, it looks like when the two of you sit together, you're more dysregulated. Is that a good choice? Is that the choice you want to make? What's a choice that makes better emotional regulation for both of you? You can start incorporating this in a conversation in your classroom, and it just becomes more normalized. So this is a really important slide, because what it's doing is it's helping us understand, regulate, relate, reason. That's the order of engagement, the sequence of engagement we want to have when it comes to students. I'm going to be honest with you. This is actually just how I engage all humans. And I've had many adults that are not ready to reason about their behavior, reason about what's happening in their life, reflect on what's going on, because they're dysregulated. So you want to look at, how do we help a kid regulate? We look through sensory systems. One of my favorite things in creating a culture of regulation, two things. At the beginning of the year, or even now, we're into the school year now, a month. Some of you are only in a week or so, but we're in the school year. You have a colleague come into your classroom and you say, what do you notice in my classroom? Tell me what you experience in here. What do you see? What do you smell? What is your sensory experience? You're going to have different colleagues that point out different things. They're going to say, I smell your perfume. I see that light is flickering. I hear a heater 3 doors down. That smart board is buzzing. You're going to have them tell you this different experience because that's going to give you a clue into what some of your students will experience. Then when you have your students do a sensory inventory with your classroom, ask your students what they experience. The cool part about kids is they're pretty honest and they don't have a filter yet. Filters really start to develop in the upper part of the brain. So you have many students sitting in your classroom wondering why they feel agitated because they hear a heater 3 doors down. Some of you are working in very old schools. You have all sorts of noises that happen in your classroom that you're not even aware of because you have a filter and you just can tune that stuff out. Kids can't tune all that out yet. You're going to have a kid that says, hey, so-and-so chews on their lip. And you're going to be like, I had no idea. Or so-and-so, when they're doing math, they tap their pen. You just start to do a sensory inventory and you start to talk about this, right? When I teach a group of educators or a group of adults, every single person in that room is having a different sensory experience. Some people like these slides. Some people hate these slides. Some people like the lighting. Some people like this, don't like the lighting. The chairs we sit in, some people like them. Some people don't. Some people bring snacks. Some people knit. Some people draw. Everything. Some people wear layers. Every single adult is having a different sensory experience in one room. The same is for kids. The difference is, as an adult, you wear layers. You aren't throwing a fit. If the projector's too loud, you just move to a different room or you take a break. Your dysregulation looks different and it's not as disruptive because you've developed these coping strategies over the years. So we want to start talking about that in the classroom. If 2 people are sitting next to each other that have a different sensory system in your classroom, they're going to activate each other. So the more we start normalizing culture of regulation, the more kids develop empathy, the more kids develop self-awareness and the ability to self-regulate. And what you're going to find is kids are actually pretty nurturing and kind if we start to teach them what's going on. The number one thing all kids want is control. The sooner we can teach them how to control their bodies, the less they will try to control their outsides. Okay. You want to look at dysregulation. How long can a student stay regulated? Perhaps your lesson takes 20 minutes for you to teach, and 80% of your kids can stay focused for 20 minutes, but the other 20% can't. Could they be dosed regulation a little sooner? Could they be doodling? Could they be coloring? Could they go in the back of the room and be walking? Teach them what to do when they're starting to get dysregulated. Okay. We want to dose sensory breaks and co-regulation prior to dysregulation. This is a very proactive approach. We also want to teach kids to cross their midline, right? Kids who are not crossing their midline really struggle. So your brain has 2 halves. You want it to cross their midline. Reading means crossing your midline. The more kids have neural pathways that help them cross their midline, the less behavior problems you're going to have because the more regulated they're able to. So start looking up some of that information about midline. Talk to your OTs in your school, your occupational therapists in your district or your community. Have a lot of really important information. How do we override the sensory system? Movement, taste, smells, all of that help override the sensory system. Some of you have kids that are walking down the hallway that are touching the walls all the time, and you spend a lot of your day going, don't touch the walls, don't touch the walls, please walk with your hands to your side, please walk quietly, don't touch the walls. I have a teacher who now is letting her kids skip to class, and some of you are like, oh my gosh, I would never do that. She's letting her kids skip during transition. They're 2nd graders. What she's noticing is they're quieter actually because they're focusing on their body. When they show up, they're regulated because they got all their wiggles out and they're ready to learn. Same thing on the way back. So it's important that we start utilizing that brain development. That bottom up brain development is so critical to understanding what we're experiencing. Okay. So I really want you to be thinking about that piece. Look at physiology, heart rates, food and snack intake, hydration, body movements. Be sure to check sensory information. So important. I often tell people, you can be in my class, all of you could get up and be moving around. I will keep teaching, but as soon as one of you starts clicking a pen, I'm twitching and I'm activated and I can't remember a thought in my head. That is because that activates my sensory system. So you want to know how you're wired too. Okay. Talked about heart rate. This just gives you a few more ideas of ways to create culture of regulation. Most of you, I would ask you, hey, do you have a picture of someone or something you love on your phone? And almost all of you will say yes. And I would say, why? And you would say, because I love that. It makes me happy. Do we do the same things in our classrooms? Do we let kids bring in pictures of someone or something they love so that when they look up or they look on their desk, they can just get that little love hit and it makes them feel happier or filled with joy? Okay. I want you to remember the power of play. Play is extremely important. People who play together feel safe together. There's lots of ways to provide play. There's also lots of ways to provide movement and continue to learn. You could put A, B, C, D in different corners. You can ask a question and then people can go to those corners, and that is still learning. All right. The language of students is play. Regulation before expectation. Great slide. I want you to remember it's not a behavior problem, it's a regulation issue. Make sure the child is regulated before you ask for an expectation. Okay, so that is all the time we have today together, friends. As always, you can reach me through my email, stacy@gobu.org. Drop a comment below. What are your biggest takeaways today? Here's an option of supporting your friends. They're going to read what your biggest takeaways are. You're going to type, you're going to read what their biggest takeaways are. You're going to get more repetitions of learning, so you'll get more out of this. Thank you for your time today. I'm so glad we got to spend this time together, and I look forward to working together some more. Have a great day. Thanks.